Hi, thanks for joining me. My name is Mike Readling. I'm going to be hosting the Navionics reef fishing webinar tonight. I just wanted to talk about some of the techniques for fishing the deeper and some of the shallow reefs and wrecks that we have around here in South Florida. Definitely South Florida is, I guess, known best for its wrecks and reefs. I grew up in Jupiter, fishing down there. Mostly inshore, but a lot of offshore as well. I've lived in Tampa and Key West, and I've fished a bunch of the wrecks and reefs down there. So I've got some pretty good experience when it comes to this kind of fishing. There seem to be nuances for every different spot you go to, but there's some basic principles that apply to every kind of wreck or every reef. So I'm just going to kind of go over some of those tonight. Start off with this. When I talk about reefs, really reefs equal wrecks or wrecks equal reefs. I'm not just talking about coral and rocks and things like that. I'm talking about sunken ships, sunken barges, artificial reefs, just anything that they've sunk and that can hold fish and hold life. So when I say I'm going to interchange kind of reefs and wrecks the whole night, and that's probably on my fault, but just kind of keep in mind we're talking about any kind of sunken underwater structure. Here off Martin County in particular, we have all kinds of these different kind of structures. This one here is Bull Shark Barge, which is a sunken barge just offshore, maybe like 35 to 40 feet of water, 50 feet of water, I guess. It's got a ton of bull sharks on it. It's also got a ton of snook on it. Bunch of cobia out there in the spring. It's a pretty good place to go fish. So there's an idea of what we're talking about. The Sirotkin is a man-made reef of concrete culverts, boxes, pilings. The Francis Langford Memorial Reef is old bridge slabs. They took down one of the bridges here in Stewart, carted the concrete offshore into about 145 feet of water and dropped it out there. So just to kind of give you an idea, we're looking at all kinds of different things. As I'm going through this, if you've got any kind of questions or anything, feel free to enter it into the I guess there's a question and answer box on your screen. If I don't get to it during the seminar, I'll try to get to it afterwards. If I don't get to it afterwards, I have your emails. I can get you, any answers, and feel free to contact me that way as well. So I guess the big question tonight is, why are we going to go reef fishing? They're deep, they're difficult, they're hard to fish. You got current and wind and everything else in the world. When I have charters, people, I ask, what do you want to do? They'll say, oh, we want to go offshore fish on the reefs. And that big question mark is my usually response. It's usually in my head, so I don't say it out loud, but, why do you want to do this? And, of course, the answer is amberjack, grouper, yellowtail, sailfish, bonita, dolphin, tuna. Every fish in the ocean tends to congregate around these reefs. They're great places to go fish, pull up some fish, especially if you're looking for dinner. Great grouper out there, great amberjack out there, a lot of yellowtail, all at different stages, different levels of the profile of the reef. So, before you start yelling about how hard and difficult it is, it's easy to remember. We're going out for amberjacks. We're going out for these reef donkeys. I don't know if you ever fished for amberjack or tried to catch them. They're some of the hardest pulling fish I've ever dealt with. They earn the name reef donkey. And, so that's the reason we're going to go fishing offshore. This is the way I would prefer to fish, hanging out, rod in my lap, catching some snook, maybe some redfish, that kind of thing, but not all the way it works. So there's a couple different kinds of reefs that I want to talk about. There's the low profile reefs, which are these kind of like Bull Shark Barge is a great example of that. It's just a flat barge. Got a little bit of structure to it, not a lot. This is a reef, a picture that I saw from the internet of just another kind of reef, something down that they sunk down. Doesn't have a whole lot of height to it. Definitely has a lot of rocks and rubble that's going to hold fish. The first thing that you want to do when you figure out, when you're going fishing is what kind of reef you want to fish. Are you going to fish low profile, or are you going to go for a higher profile reef such as this that I, again, saw off the internet? This is a ship that was sunk in 110 feet of water. You can see how the bottom of it is laying at 110 feet of water, but the kind of the top mast and the back deck come up to 50 and 75. So that ship's got a 50, 65 foot profile at its highest. This is going to be the ideal place to fish for a ton of different species, because I can almost guarantee you at the top of that, where it's 50 foot up around the mast, and even around the 75 foot mark, you're probably going to have a whole lot of yellowtail, little snappers, things like that. As you move down deeper onto the deck and even into the part that's crumbled into the water, you'll start finding your groupers that can hide in the holes there. There'll be a lot more porgies. You know, this particular wreck, or this particular illustration shows a wreck that's got a lot of different levels to it, and this is the kind of wreck that you're going to find sailfish, kingfish, blackfin tuna, wahoo around, because there's a lot of different species gathered there. They'll have a lot of choices. Tonight, for our purposes, we're going to choose the Haley Glassford Reef. This is a screenshot from the Navionics smartphone app. And again, it's really easy to figure out profiles and information about different reefs. I picked the Haley Glassford because it's just offshore here from Martin County out of Stewart. It's a wreck that I've fished a couple times, so I know a little bit about it. But just to give you an idea, if you put that crosshairs right on top of the reef and hit that question mark button, you're going to get this little screen on the left-hand side. Tell you the name of the reef, the depth you know, it's sitting at 180 feet. It'll tell you a bunch of other information. If you touch the top box that says Haley Glassford Reef, touch that arrow, you're going to get this information over here. It's a 224-foot long ship. It's got 84 feet of verticality, which means it's got an 84-foot profile, and it sits in about 187 feet of water. It was sunk in 187 feet of water. If you go back to that last slide, it will show you it's sitting in 180 feet. So a lot of these wrecks, the artificial ones especially, once they've been sunk, they'll move, they'll settle, tides, currents will move them a little bit. This one seems to have settled up 7 feet deeper than or 7 feet shallower than where it started. So what that means, it's in 187 feet. It's got 84 feet of verticality. So, you know, there's 103 feet down to the top of that ship. So this is a good depth for what we want to do. And what we want to do is get back to fishing. So there's another shot of the Haley Glassford Reef. I'm going to talk a little bit right now about currents. The most difficult thing when it comes to fishing one of these reefs, because obviously if this boat's in 187 feet of water, most of us don't have, you know, 600 feet of anchor line to drop out and get to the bottom and be able to hold us, especially in the current. And there's always current. Especially around here. And again, I'm out of Jensen Beach, so I'm going to talk a little bit more about Martin County, but no matter where you are, there's current. We're close to the Gulf Stream. The closer you get to the Gulf Stream, the higher the current is. So generally what I found is our current around here runs between 2 to 5 knots. Just generally speaking, I've seen it a lot more. I've actually seen it less. But it runs 2 to 5 knots, and it runs from south to north. So the current's going this way. And on any given day, again, it could be more, it could be less, but it's going to be generally headed south to north. If you want a good idea of how fast it's running, you can just cut your motor, sit there for a second, your boat is going to catch the current. You can look on your GPS to get an idea, you know, 3, 4 knots, you know, whatever it is. So what we hope, the ideal situation is you've got about a 3 knot current moving north. You got a north wind blowing south, and it's just enough to kind of keep you still so that you don't move a whole lot, and you can just kind of hover over the wreck if it's 200 feet deep like this one is. That never happens, almost never happens. It's rare that it happens. But, you know, when it does, it's awesome. So we've got our current going this way, and for the sake of our little demonstration here, let's say the wind's blowing out of the east. So the wind's coming this way, and it's not a terrible wind. It's, you know, maybe 10, 15 knots, just enough to let you know the wind is there. It's going to blow your boat. It's going to move you around. And it's going to, you know, it's going to affect you. So we've got our current, we've got our wind, we have our little wreck right here. So what we know is a lot of the smaller fish, a lot of the snappers, a lot of those porgies, even some of the kingfish are going to hang out on the upcurrent side. They're going to hang out on this side of the reef because, you know, the current comes through, little bait fish will come through, it's good eating. On the other side, on this side, the downcurrent side, I got those backwards, sorry. On the upcurrent side is where the big fish are. So the downcurrent side, you're going to have your snappers or porgies, little fish, kingfish. On this side is going to be your bigger fish. This is going to be your grouper. It's going to be your amberjack. It's going to be your blackfin tuna. It's going to be all the big fish that are going to kind of rule that reef. And what this means is they get first shot at the first baits that come through. So keeping that in mind, today we're going to talk about fishing for amberjacks more than anything. So we want to work our drift so that we drift into that reef on the upcurrent side, kind of go through it, and then maybe if we don't lose our bait, maybe we'll catch a snapper or something on the backside. The hard part is setting that whole drift up. So here, we're going to make our boat lime green. So we know the current's going to take us north. We know the wind's going to blow us east. So what I would normally try to do, and again, this is going to take a time or two unless you get it right the first time, is kind of set up right here and start your drift. And as you drift, current's taking you, wind's blowing you. Hopefully, it takes you right across like this. And then you're going to come through here. You're going to get out, come all the way back around, and start again. So what we can do the first time, we're going to drift. We're going to drop our baits, and I'll get into rigs and rods and all that in a second. But we're going to drop our baits. We're going to go through the thing. We're going to look at our plotter the whole time. You're going to see where the reef comes up on your plotter. You're going to hopefully be able to see markings, that kind of thing. So when we come back around to the south so we can make another drift, if we didn't like the way we went, we thought we went too far off the wreck, we'll set up this time inside. Try to catch it just the right way. Go back through it. You know what? All right, that worked. Come back. Now you can use your second track as kind of your identifier for how you want to drift that wreck. So that just kind of gives you an idea of how you're going to want to set up, taking current wind into effect and realizing which way you're going to go, you're going to go the same way every time. You just have to line it up so you hit the reef at the right point, especially to get those fish on the front part of it. Oh, hang on. We got to clear that off. All right. Rods and reels. Here we go. So the first question I get, we'll tell somebody we're going to go fishing offshore. Oh, what do I bring to go fishing offshore? The answer to that is anything heavy. The heavier, the better. You want something with a really sturdy backbone. The shorter the rod's probably better. Inshore I'm fishing with a 7 to 7.5 foot rod. Offshore, 6 foot is a nice sturdy rod. I don't always have guys like this to help me push it in, so I want my rod to have as much backbone as I can. Even 5.5, but 6 foot, nice heavy rod with a big reel. Whether you use a spinning reel or a conventional reel, totally up to you. It's your choice. A lot of people, especially when they're doing this kind of fishing down deep, they want to go conventional just because it's got a little bit more torque to it. It's a little bit easier to reel up. I've caught 50-pound AJs on spinning reels. You just have to make sure that you've got a big enough spinning reel to get enough line on it to get it down to the bottom to be able to get those fish up, especially when they make a run. So the reel's really kind of up to you. I would suggest a conventional, but again, whatever you've got. More importantly than that is what you're putting on the reel. Again, big, heavy. Usually 60 to 80-pound braid, especially if I'm fishing wrecks where fish are going to come out and grab me and try to run back into a hole. 50 to 60-pound braid. And what I do is I've got a three-way swivel. Here we go, three-way swivel. And I'll have the line coming into one part. I'm going to have the 60-pound braid comes into the one hole. Off of the other swivel part, I'm going to have about 40 feet of 40-pound fluorocarbon. Something that's going to disappear in the water, but something that's long enough that fish aren't necessarily going to get spooked by the swivel coming down. And then on the other swivel, you put enough weight to be able to get you down through the current down to the bottom. Remember, the current's going to be stronger the deeper you go for the most part. So you want, even 8 ounces, half a pound of weight. And what I do with that is I put it on a 3-foot long piece of mono, light mono, like 15, 20 pound test mono off that third swivel. So I've got, my main line coming into the swivel. Coming off of this side, I've got, 40 pound fluorocarbon, about 40 feet of it, good length. Over here, a short length of mono, light mono. And the reason that we do that is when you're fishing wrecks, you're drifting, eventually you're going to drift into that wreck. And what you want, ideally, is your bait to bounce off and come over the top. What happens more often than not, your weight hits, it catches something, and all of a sudden you've caught the wreck. Does no good. If you've got that light mono holding your sinker on there, if it's light enough, you can usually break it off, and what that does is it'll break the mono before it breaks your 40-pound leader, and you can usually get everything back and just retie a sinker back on. I lost a lot of weights before I figured out something I lost a lot of terminal rigs before I figured something like that out, and it's really helpful. So we've got our 60-pound braid, we've got our 40-pound leader, fluoro, and then we've got that 15 to 20-pound mono with those sinker on it just to get the bait down. Speaking of bait, anybody who knows me knows that I'm a live bait guy. If you've ever listened to any webinar, any talk I've ever given, I love my pilchards, I love my sardines, I love my greenies. There's nothing better than dropping one of them back behind a boat with a circle hook through the nose and just waiting for something to happen. That goes whether I'm fishing inshore for snook and tarpon, on the beach for jacks or cobia even, or offshore, something, for drifting for sailfish or dolphin, or even fishing deep like this. I like my live baits. Every lure in the world is designed to look like a live bait. I can get live bait. I don't need to buy a lure that looks like a live bait. I've got the real thing. That said, when it comes to fishing out on the reefs and wrecks, I do get a little more flexible, and we'll get back down to that in a minute. But this is kind of what you're looking for when you're going over the wreck. You're going to kind of see peaks and valleys. This is a low profile wreck. Obviously, doesn't have a lot of lift to it, but you can see there's something going on there. 40 or 45 feet comes up to a little peak, and then the little green and here. Wait, I can circle. This is a group of fish that you're going to want to target. This little spoke right here, all of those are fish in there right on the bottom that you're going to want to target. Up here in the main part, all those specks, this isn't a screenshot that I took, so I can't say this for certain, but I would almost count them as smaller fish or small bait fish. I would concentrate more on the stuff down here on the bottom. That's what we want to be doing. So when we're dropping, we're always looking at the plotter. We want to see where the wreck starts. We want to see where the wreck ends. We want to see if there's fish on it and where those fish are kind of hanging. If you're fishing like the glass rig that we talked about, if you're fishing that wreck and we know that the AJ, it's 180 feet deep, we know the AJs are hanging about a 125 or 130 because we can see them on our plotter. We you can gauge, you can drop down to, not all the way to the bottom, but, 2/3 of the way, 3/4 of the way down. And that way you have yourself in the zone. And that's really the key to this whole reef and wreck fishing. Is a lot of people just open the bail, let the thing fall, they feel the bottom, they reel up twice. Okay, that works a lot of times. It would probably work great in this instance right here with all this clouds of fish on the bottom of the plotter. For something with a higher profile, that doesn't always work. You have to find out where the fish are eating. You've got to see where they're at and then kind of fish that depth. The other thing you have to look for is, if you're fishing, as soon as you get a bite, you need to start hauling. Pull, reel, pull as quickly as you can to get that fish away from the wreck, up out of the wreck, because what grouper and AJs live on, come out, grab a bait, shoot right back into the hole they're from. They're already buried before you even know you've got a hit. The whole key, and I've lost a lot of line trying to teach people this. Once you feel that rod, once it hooks, you need to everything you can to muscle that fish, even if it's a few feet, just to gain some yardage and get it away from the hole. As much as you can to get him away from that wreck, because you're going to be done in 2 seconds flat. Your line's going to break and you're going to reel up about 165 feet of nothing. So that's one of the biggest keys that we kind of go through. Now I said, I didn't lie. I said that I don't always have to fish live bait when I'm out on these reefs and wrecks, and that's true. The Spro 1 ounce bucktail is probably the #1 go-to bait for me when I'm jig for me when I'm offshore. I've caught Almaco jacks, amberjacks, grouper, anything on this kind of bucktail right here. Sometimes if it's a little bit deeper, you need a little bit quicker to the bottom, you can go up in weight. But the 1 ounce, for whatever reason, and I've used a lot of different bucktails, the 1 ounce Spro has just proven to be the most effective for me, the best one, the one that I go to whenever I need to. So that's one of them. And then the other thing that I love doing, vertical jigging. I'd never done this before. I went down to the Keys a few years ago. Somebody put me on a boat and showed me how to vertical jig, and it was one of the best things I've ever done, even though I'm totally, completely out of shape. And after about one drop down to 200 feet and jigging it back up quickly, I'm completely out of breath. But other than that, there's nothing better than dropping one of these jigs down. And the whole key to them is a rhythm when you're bringing them up. You kind of pump and reel, pump and reel, pump and reel, and you can see, if the water's clear enough, you can see them coming up to you. They come up in spurts, and they flutter. And this one here with the butterfly, bad circle. With the butterfly rig, that's exactly how I rig mine. And these things are expensive, but they are well worth, there's nothing better than dropping one down, reeling and pumping about 4 times, and all of a sudden your rod just stops because you've got a 22-pound mutton snapper. I caught on one of these one time, or a grouper, or an amberjack, whatever it is. It's just the feeling that goes through your body when all of a sudden it just stops and you realize that something big is on there because it came out and ate that is huge. So again, I'm not always live bait. Vertical jigging is one of my favorite things to do. There's a bunch of other ways to go about it. A lot of people will kite fish. Offshore they'll find the wrecks. Offshore they'll kind of kite fish over those wrecks, hope something comes out. But so we talked about making your drift. You've seen the plotter. You've seen the wreck on the plotter come through. When your plotter goes to flat like that on the very bottom, it's time to wheel back around, go back to where you started, and again, use that first track that you just created to gauge how you want to do your next drift. Like if you felt like you were a little too far east of it, you didn't get blown enough, start a little bit left of that track and go through and see what happens. Again, you're going to wait till the peaks and valleys are coming, drop your bait down. You'll be able to see where the fish are at. I forgot I was supposed to talk about this. I really wanted to talk about this because this is the other thing I love doing. So, especially on shallow wrecks, and this is a huge deal on some of the wrecks around here, 50, 60 feet deep, with the wreck that comes up to maybe 35 feet, and even some of the ones that are a little deeper than that. You can go out on a summer, like today, I was flatter than anything around here. There's a little bit of drift, a little bit of current, but nothing great, and just chum, throw over some fish parts, throw over little glass minnows are all over the place. Get the water kind of started. And especially when you're on top of these wrecks and reefs that are holding fish, 30, 40 feet below, they see activity like this on top, and all of a sudden you're going to get all kinds of attention. And it's going to start out little. It's going to be little snappers coming up through it. It's going to be some jacks, and you'll start seeing them swimming through your chum slick. But what that does is it attracts the attention of all the other fish down below. Doing this, even in like 60 feet of water, I think we've had wahoo swim up our chum trail right behind us because we're fishing close enough to their structure that activity gets their attention. They come up to see what's going on. We've had sailfish swim through swim through our chum line. We've had dolphin come up, obviously. You know, every fish, AJs have even come up, to be honest with you. They stay below the surface, but they'll come up and check out what's going on. So this is another way that on those days when it's not blowing 40 miles an hour, when the current's not running, you know, 9 knots, and you can kind of, you know, hold your spot a little bit, even if it requires gunning the motor and backing up a little bit, or even going in circle and coming back around. Chumming on top of these shallower reefs is one of the perfect ways to get, you know, your shot at a lot of different kind of fish. Again, this is a good time to have a fly rod on board because things come up, you can throw flies at them. It's just a unique way, kind of a unique way to get things stirred up, go behind your boat, and kind of turn the day into something that can be fun as opposed to headache-inducing, which is what a lot of reef fishing can be when you're trying to figure out drifts and wind and current and get everything pointed in the right direction. And then as soon as you do, you're back around to start off again. You know, it's really about all I had as far as talking about the reef fishing. I know, you know, a lot of you probably have a lot of questions, and that's great. Feel free to enter some questions into the Q&A part. That's my email address right there on the bottom. I'll leave that up for a minute. If anybody's got any questions at all, whether it's reef fishing, snook fishing, snapper fishing, you know, I'm going somewhere in Florida and I just need some ideas, let me know. Email's the best way to get hold of me. Again, if I don't get to your questions tonight, I've got your email. I can get hold of you. So thank you very much for joining. I appreciate you listening to me. Hopefully y'all learned a little something out of this and can take your tidbit offshore later on this week and have a good Memorial Day weekend. Thank you. Have a great night.